Like, you don't even realize that everything is just slightly soggy until your whole house starts getting moldy. The tell is a British person who hates you is never gonna say it to your face. The average Brit is definitely not as sophisticated as we make them out to be in America. Hey guys, welcome back to the Girl Gone London channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I'm an American expat who's lived in the UK for almost 10 years, which is shocking even to myself. And today I am responding to all of your assumptions about life in the UK. Okay, so first things first, if you want more information on British life, whether it's traveling to the UK or visiting the UK, make sure to subscribe because that's going to make sure that you get future videos that I'm producing, and I've got plans for loads of fun videos over the year. Next thing, I got these assumptions from people in my Facebook group. And if you're not part of the Facebook group, you are very welcome to join. So I'll have the link in the description, and it is for anybody who is visiting the UK, moving to the UK, or just interested in the UK. We talk about all different things. We've got events, we've got loads of friendly people, and really anything that you could want to ask or get information on regarding the UK. So make sure to join because we would love to have you. So these assumptions, I'm not going to say who wrote them. I'm just going to read out the assumptions, and I'm going to go ahead and respond and tell you the truth about life in the UK. The first assumption. In my mind, I want to live in a little village that I can ride my bike everywhere. I don't know if that place exists, but it does in my head in the UK. I feel like this is possible. I'm not saying this is true, like this is not what I do, but I feel like you could live in like a small village where you ride your bike everywhere and it's very idyllic, and it does exist. Is that most of the UK? No. Is it possible, and is that dream a reality for you? I would say yes. The only thing to keep in mind is that actually cycling is popular in the UK, but it's almost more so like in towns and cities that it's popular because they have cycle lanes and like actual infrastructure for the cyclists. If you're talking about a little village, yes, you can ride your bike, but actually it's slightly more dangerous because there's not as many cycle lanes, if any. And also you're going to be up against British roads. Like, cycling on British roads is terrifying because first of all, people are going like 60 miles an hour. The roads, especially in villages, are super small. Sometimes it's just like a one car passing, so the other car has to like pull over into a bush, and they're winding, and oftentimes you can't see around the corner. A lot of UK villages are actually not well set out for people who are cycling, but again, I feel like we could find you a little village to cycle around if that's your dream. The next assumption. The UK is rainy and damp. It hurts my heart, but that is 100% true. There are a lot of people who say like, oh, but did you know that it doesn't even rain in the UK as much as it rains in like Seattle or like New York City or something? And like that might be true. The exact amount of water falling from the sky might not be as much as in some other places. It's just that the water and rain and dampness doesn't come in one season or in one day or in one weekend. It kind of just like drags on into infinity. It's like a drizzling kind of rain. I've heard it's very similar to like Oregon's climate. Being from Florida, I'm used to torrential downpours and then we all go out and play in the sun, and that's just not the case here. Extreme weather isn't even really that common. So anytime there's a good thunderstorm, I'm like glued to the window watching it. But yes, I would say confirmed the UK is rainy, and double confirmed the UK is damp. Like, you don't even realize that everything is just slightly soggy until your whole house starts getting moldy. Like, I've had mold issues basically anywhere I lived, including my current house, which there's no actual reason it should be moldy besides I feel like the country is moldy. The windows get moldy. There's mold, just like, it is just all damp and soggy, except for in the summer when it is scorching hot temperatures and then everything dries out for like 2 weeks. But British people don't seem that fazed by it. Like, it's the middle of January right now when I'm filming this, and people are drying their clothes outside on the lines, like outside in the very wet damp, soggy environment. I'm not sure if those clothes will ever dry, but they're committed. Okay, next assumption. One assumption I had was it was cheaper to live there. Oh, but it's not. I was shocked by how expensive housing and cars are. Okay, so the assumption is it's cheaper to live here. There are a couple different ways to address this because I feel like every time we talk about expenses in the UK, everybody thinks of London and Southeast England. And if we're talking about that, 100%, it is not cheap, super expensive when it comes to like housing. I often spend my days looking at American real estate to see what I could afford in like rural Kentucky with what I'm paying for my house in Southeast England. And I basically feel like I could own a mansion there for what we pay here for like 700 square feet. But anyway, not bitter. But yeah, it's definitely not cheaper here, but there's a caveat because I have talked with my husband about this a lot as we try and talk about the UK versus the US. And I feel on average, it's basically probably going to come out the same once you tally up everything. So you're talking like, yes, it might be more expensive in terms of housing here, but car insurance and house insurance is usually cheaper, and we have the NHS, so we do have higher taxes, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also we don't have to pay for surgeries or medical treatments. And the food here is actually in the grocery stores much cheaper than in the US. So I would like to one day do like an actual month-to-month comparison, and I will once I can actually get to the US. But definitely I'm going to bust the assumption that it's cheaper just overall to live here, because I'd say it's not cheaper. It's either more expensive or on par. And also it depends on where you're talking about, because if we're talking about the north of England versus say like New York City, then you might be like, oh my gosh, I'm so rich over here in the north of England with what I was making in New York City. So it is kind of hard to compare because there are different price ranges in different parts of the UK. But overall, I would say not cheaper, but I would like to do an experiment about that one day. Next assumption was I thought I'd never make friends with anyone while living in Britain. Turns out I was wrong. So I'm very happy to hear that this person was wrong about not making friends and was able to make friends in Britain. I have found it difficult to make friends in the UK, and I'm not talking about just like in my life now, but I've been here for a long time. So over the period of time I've been here, almost 10 years, I have just found, I'm introverted, so that doesn't help because I was used to the kind of American sentiment of like someone comes into your neighborhood that's new and you like deliver them a breadbasket, or, you know, like the new employee or new student or something gets this like warm welcome and everybody introduces themselves. That's not necessarily the case here because it's kind of a culture of introverts. Everybody is just a bit more insular. That's not to say that people aren't nice and that people aren't friendly and wonderful, because they are. It's just a longer process than I was used to friend making. I talk about this in the Girl Gone London book, which I will link to below, but that is my book about life as an American in the UK. So I've got some really practical tips on making friends. So long story short, I'm going to go ahead and actually say that I think the assumption that it's harder to make friends in the UK is true, but the assumption that you can't or won't make friends in the UK, definitely not true. You just have to put in a little bit more effort and be the person who approaches and invites people to things, and you kind of have to work a bit to get into their existing like friendship groups, but it is possible. Next assumption is you can take the train to other cities, but if you want to see the countryside or little towns, you need a car. I'm gonna say that's half true, but the UK has really good public transportation and you can take a train to a lot of countryside destinations. And even if you get to that countryside like train stop, I'm thinking of like the New Forest has like a couple train stations. From there you can get like a taxi, I would say Uber, but a lot of times the small villages don't have Uber, but a taxi or even like a public bus to further flung destinations in the countryside. Obviously it takes longer and it's not as easy as simply getting in a car and driving, but if you're a visitor, driving in the UK is definitely a lot of it scary if you're not used to driving on the left or all of the British road rules. So I would say I advise the majority of people who come to visit that you definitely do not need to rent a car If you only want to do rural areas, like you don't want to go to towns and cities and you just want to like explore the mountains of North Wales, then you would need a car or want to go on a tour that takes you. But for the most part, I'm going to say it is possible to go and see the countryside and to go for really beautiful walks, all while just taking trains and buses, which is a really good part about living in the UK. Next, everyone has tea and scones or biscuits every day in the afternoon. Okay, so this is a really popular assumption, and I've talked about this in some of my posts on what people think when they visit London, that everybody just stops to have afternoon tea. So I'm going to go ahead and right away confirm that the tea part is 100% true. We are taught like not to stereotype and not to I'm going to generalize. People in the UK love tea. They love tea in the morning. They love tea in the afternoon. They love tea in the evening. I have a video on how to make British tea if you're interested in checking that out. But yeah, the tea every day, definitely a thing. When it comes to the scones and biscuits, that's where people have the assumption that's actually wrong, because people, like if you're in an office setting, people would bring in like just, like office treats like you would anywhere, and people might have like an afternoon cookie or biscuit with their tea, but it's not like the whole country has like a full sit down afternoon tea every afternoon. But the actual tea part, confirmed. If you are interested in tea, you will love the UK. Okay, next assumption. There are lots of ghosts in the centuries-old houses and buildings. Now, I have never had a supernatural experience, but I'm gonna say that this place is so old with so much history that if you are into ghost hunting, I really feel like you could find it here. There are some pretty funny ghost hunting shows in the UK that my husband has showed me. Not really sure I think those are true, but yeah, I mean, a lot of these buildings date back to like 1200 or even before. You've got Roman ruins. If you believe in ghosts, there's probably a lot of them here. That you'll experience sarcastic, dry humor. 100% true. Confirmed. The British sense of humor is very deadpan, very sarcastic. They find like awkward situations and cringy situations hilarious. So the way I can explain the difference in American humor and British humor is that if you think about American shows, like think about Friends, or any sitcom really, like we're waiting for the punchline. We like to know, like, let's all laugh at the funny thing someone just said, because we can kind of all recognize that that was the joke being told or that was the funny situation. British humor is just like, a British sitcom is like 30 minutes of just like cringe, and you're never really sure when the actual joke is, but the whole thing is funny to them because it's just awkward. And the deadpan thing is completely true. Often when you first move here, you feel like you can't tell if people are making fun of you or if they are joking with you, because they'll say things in such a deadpan way. But the tell is, a British person who hates you is never going to say it to your face because they're too British. So if they are making fun of you or if they say something mean to you, it means they like you. Next assumption. Getting to spend afternoons walking through beautiful gardens. I'm going to say that's true. I'm going to say that's not my life right now. Most people don't spend like a lot of time walking through gardens, but there are a lot of gardens that you can go to walk through, if that makes sense. I live in just like kind of a standard neighborhood, and luckily we've got some fields that I could walk through, though they're very muddy right now, but we can go and drive and walk through some really beautiful gardens. So I would say if that's something that you're interested in experiencing in the UK, there's a lot of green, luscious, beautiful, manicured gardens that you can walk through. So I'm going to say that assumption is true, even though not every day. Somebody says an assumption might be that it would be easy to get a job there, and then they said probably not, but that might be the assumption. So unfortunately, that assumption would be false. It is not easy to get a job here, especially if you're an expat. I have a whole course on moving to the UK, which is online, which I will also link below. And that goes into how to find a job as an expat in the UK, how to do your resume, how to do your CV, how to get interviews, what kind of visas, like all that practical stuff. Unfortunately, it is not as easy as just showing up and saying you want a job. Some countries I know it is pretty easy to just go there and work because they need the labor or they just have a different visa system. The UK is not quite so easy, but it is possible. Next assumption, books, lots and lots of bookstores, history tours, art events, and big food, drink culture. I would say that that's all true. You can get all of that here. Bookstores, yes. I mean, not necessarily more than in the US or anywhere else, I feel like, but enough. History tours, yes, you can find those. Art events, definitely. Yeah, I would say that that's true if that's the kind of person that you are. I think one of the funniest things about moving here and like realizing the real situation is when we think about the UK and British people as Americans, we think everybody is like Hugh Grant, or whatever characters he plays in the movies, and that British people just like are so sophisticated. Like we think of the Queen, like so sophisticated, like surely everybody spends their time just like getting cultured. That's not true. There are definitely a lot of people who do, but there's a lot of people in a lot of countries who do that for fun. So if that is you and you love a good bookstore, art event, history tour, definitely it's here. That will be your life. But there's also a lot of people who just watch British reality television and get drunk at the pub, and that's basically it. The average Brit is definitely not as sophisticated as we make them out to be in America. I mean, they're human. They've got different interests. And I just think it's funny that we all just think of, I'm not saying this person who has the assumption does, but I think in general, we all just like think of British people as like just so proper and prim, and like that is 100% not true. It is true for some people, but it's not true for the whole population. The last assumption is simply that there are high taxes, and that is true. So the VAT, which is the sales tax, I think is 20% that's baked into sales of a lot of things. We also do pay, I don't know the actual percentage, but we pay a significant amount in like income tax and national insurance and stuff towards the NHS. And that is much higher than you would expect in the US, especially because I'm from Florida where we don't have income tax and sales tax is like 7% in my county. But there's two things about taxes I want to mention. The first thing being that the culture around taxes in the UK is actually different than in the US. So I feel like in the US, we have this history of being like, no taxation without representation. We hate paying taxes. Not everybody, but there is like taxes is like a dirty word. It's not really the same here. It doesn't really have the same like cultural connotation of this whole fight about taxes. People just kind of accept that it's like for the good of the whole and that the taxes go towards things that as a society we need. So it's not usually, I mean, don't get me wrong, like people will have political arguments about like different spending and ways of doing things. But most people aren't like about to revolt over high taxes. It's just a part of life here. And that brings me to my second point, because we do pay higher taxes, but there's also a lot of things we don't have to pay for that are included in our taxes, healthcare being a huge one. So obviously, whether you're self-employed, whether you're employed, whether you are not employed, if you have an emergency, if you need an ambulance, if you're having a baby, if you break your leg, like it's, you might have a small prescription cost of like £9, but you're not going to end up with a bill. And so a lot of people accept the trade-off of what is included in the taxes that we pay. And for most people, it's just taken out of their paycheck before you even see it. And in some ways that means that you don't often think about how much you're paying unless you specifically like go into your paychecks and tally up. But yes, I will confirm that comparatively to the US, the British do have high taxes. So that brings me to the end of this video of assumptions about life in the UK. I hope you found it interesting. I would love to hear your comments on other videos that you want me to do, different topics that you want to know about. I would, again, love to welcome you into our Facebook community, and make sure to check out the link for that. And don't forget to subscribe. And I know people say this on YouTube all the time and you're like, stop telling me to subscribe. But if you are somebody who does want to watch future videos, it's just a lot easier for you to get notified when you're subscribed. And also it helps me out because the more people that are subscribed, the more YouTube recommends my videos for other people to find and to watch in case they might find it helpful. So anyway, please do all of that or just have a great day, and I'll see you next time.